Hi, my name is Steve Rahi. I am a cloud solutions architect specializing in management technologies. Today's discussion focuses on autopilot device preparation. So let me say at the outset that this is a component that is a recent-ish addition for the autopilot capabilities that everyone knows and loves. It is something that is being actively developed, but I wanted to talk about it in this session because it is a really good direction for autopilot. Autopilot device prep is not traditional autopilot. The two are separate. They're on separate tracks, right? But autopilot device prep is a different way of doing things with autopilot, some additional capabilities. Again, things that are continuing to be developed, but it's mature enough that definitely worth taking a look. And so we will do so in this session. So what is the agenda? Here it is, kind of typical agenda for sessions like this. And let's get into it. So what is autopilot device preparation? So it is device preparation, right? So autopilot device preparation is used to set up and configure new devices, getting them ready for production use. That's what autopilot is as well. But again, autopilot device prep is a different way of doing this, right? It is not, as I show at the bottom, equivalent to autopilot. It is a separate way of doing things. It is intended to be simple by design, so very efficient in what it does, right? It aims to really help you have a lot more streamlined overall experience with getting devices ready, right? There's a couple of ways that we do that. One way, just to throw in here, the traditional autopilot, you first need to go capture a machine GUID so that you have that in the autopilot service. Either that or the OEM needs to load it for you. That is gone in this autopilot device prep. That's one way it's simplified. There's others, right, that you'll see as we go along. Then finally, then why autopilot device prep? Well, the deployment time, right? Same reasons that you would have for autopilot in general, but deployment time, reduced infrastructure, end user experience, troubleshooting, blah, blah. One thing, near real-time deployment status. So you'll see a different way that we will show you deployment status. Another one that's really important is this thing called enrollment time grouping. I'll show that to you. More granular reporting that comes with autopilot device prep. Okay, so what are the requirements for autopilot device prep? Well, you see that it is a Windows 11 feature only. It also is intra-ID join only. So will that be the way it is going forward? Don't know, right? There's some different things that the autopilot device prep team are considering, so we'll see, what comes. But intra-ID join is only where this is supported right now, not hybrid, and so forth, as of the time of this recording anyway. And again, making the point multiple times, autopilot device prep is not traditional autopilot. Does kind of the same thing, right? You're going to build the machine and make it ready for use, but it is not the same way of traditional autopilot. So these are some graphics that I lifted from my original autopilot sessions. And the point is that this first section, where either you or the OEM would have to capture the device GUID, hardware ID, whatever, load it up into the autopilot service, and then you're ready for autopilot, that is no longer a thing, right? So step 2 becomes step 1, where you basically provide the machine to the user. The user then logs in, and autopilot device prep will start, right? So now a simplified approach to doing that. How do we enable that? Well, I'll explain that a bit. This is also a graphic that I lifted from my autopilot sessions, and I don't know, maybe it's not the best way to describe it, but hopefully it gives a sense of what's different with autopilot device prep. So let's walk through it. So the first thing is the user is going to power on the device. Once they receive it, there's some setup windows that they're going to go through. Finally, they're going to log in to the device, right? So device checks in with Intune, checks the user account that's being used. When they log in, goes up and says, okay, is this user account configured for the device prep, right? If it is, then we go to the autopilot service and progress. If not, then we go the different route for traditional Windows setup, right? So once the user is confirmed for autopilot device prep, then we're going to go receive the UBI configuration, go through the UBI configuration as defined. Here, there's also kind of a devices that joined into Intra ID, automatically enrolled in Intune. We go over, continue. The devices added to your Autopilot Device Preparation device group. I'll explain all of this as we go through. And then any deployments targeted to the Autopilot Device Preparation group, which is also, I mentioned enrollment time grouping. That's what this is, right? Where you specify a group that the device should be added to as a part of Autopilot. That is your Autopilot Device Prep device group. Again, talk to you about that in a minute. You specify that group. The machine, as part of Autopilot, is added to that group. You have some configurations, apps or scripts or whatever targeted to this group that the device shows up in, and it will immediately start to go through those configurations, right? That's enrollment time grouping. At the end of it, you have a system configured and ready for use, right? Now, there may be some things that are still happening in the background for that system, but because of enrollment time grouping, the idea is you can get these configs down to the system right away, and at least the key ones, and then the other ones can build behind the scenes. Okay, so this is just kind of a graphic, overall. So let's go show how we would go through and configure this. So to do that, I'm just going to pull up my my Intune portal, and let me go home here because I was working on something else. All right. So the first thing, and I need to also pull up my Azure portal. I also need to type correctly. There we go. So the first thing, like with traditional Autopilot, we need to configure automatic Windows enrollment. So how do we do that? Well, we're going to go to Intra ID here. And then we're going to go to Manage. We're going to go to Manage. And then we're going to scroll down until we find MDM Mobility MDM WIP, right? We're going to go in to this. We're going to find the Intune app in this list. And then here are the configurations. Here's the one we want, right? What is the user scope? In my case, I have everyone. In your case, you can choose everyone, a group of people, right? A group of people, or nobody. If you choose nobody, then Autopilot won't work at all, right? These are the same settings that Autopilot uses. So I would call out that if you are using traditional Autopilot, then be aware that changes you make here for Autopilot Device Prep will also impact traditional Autopilot, right? So it shouldn't be a big deal, I wouldn't think, but just be aware of that. So you configure this. The other thing you need to go configure is specifically being able to have devices join the Intra ID, right? Let me go back home. Sorry, let me go back to Intra ID here. And then under Manage again, we have Devices. And then under Devices, we will have specifically Device Settings under Manage here. And this is where you will configure your user's ability to join their device to Intra ID. In my case, it's all. If you can choose again selected, which will be a group, or none. If you choose none, then the device won't be able to do any kind of autopilot at all, because any kind of autopilot device prep anyway, because we need to be able to join intra to be able to do this, right? Okay, so that's first, and that's easy enough to go configure, right? The next thing is we need to go create some groups. So I'm going to go close this. You could do it through Entra, but I'll just do it through the Intune portal. And I'll show you, I'll show this to you, how you do it. So the first thing, well, let me show you that I have my groups created. So I have my Autopilot Device Preparation. This is my devices group. Then I have one for users. So we will first create the devices group. So let me go back up here, say new group. I'm going to leave everything the same. I'll just call this a random set of characters because I'm not going to save it. Membership type I'll leave alone, and I'm going to select owner. And on the owner side, I'm going to select Intune, right? And I'm going to scroll down. There is a particular name that I'm looking for in my tenant, right? Hopefully, here it is, right? In my tenant, it's called this. It's very likely not called this in your tenant. It could be, right? But likely it's not. Oops. Hang on a minute. I made a slight mistake on the other screen. Let me go and correct that. Stand by. So sorry, I had hit a wrong mouse click over on another screen, and it changed some things. So anyway, fix that, right? But what this will be called in most tenants is the Intune provisioning client. Regardless, whether it's called this, whether it's called that, or any other thing, if you have this GUID right here, right, for this web app, if you have that particular GUID for the app, that's all you need, right? That is the one you want. So I'm going to select this as the owner. Now, what this does, the group that I'm creating, I'll show you, right? So I could finish creating the group. I'm not going to because I've already got it. But I'll show you real quick in mine. Autopilot, come on. Okay, let me go back to this top level view. There we go. So this is the group that I was just preparing. And if you go look at members, right, you will see that I have one device in here. This is my autopiloting device. So I'll explain more in a minute. Here, let's go look at owners. So if I go look at owners, I have my Intune confidential client. That's the one that I showed you. It's the service principal. So on the back end, the point is on the back end, whenever your autopilot device, or when the device is going through autopilot device prep, it will get added to this group, right? There is, when you configure, I'll show you this in a minute, when you can configure your profile for autopilot device prep, you're going to tie together this group and the other group that I'm going to show you. And when the device goes through and is added to the group as a part of autopilot device prep, it will be added to this group because this is the group I've specified in my profile. So again, that'll come clear in just a minute. But that's how enrollment time grouping is able to work, because this group will have your autopiloting device put into it. And this group is one that you will target your various applications and scripts to. And again, you will see me do that in just a minute, right? Now, there's one other group that I need to make sure is available, and that's this one. So this is a user group. And in this user group, I'm going to add all of the people that I should be allowing to go through Autopilot Device Prep. Now, this is my lab, so it's just me. That's the only person in the group. But if you have an organization, any user that you want to include in Autopilot Device Prep, you need to put them in this group. Now, questions might come up. Does it matter what these groups are named? No, it doesn't, right? You can name them whatever you want to. You tie them together with the Autopilot Device Prep profile in a moment. You'll see that, and that's how they get combined. Another question might come up. Okay, but what if we want to do a different set of things for different users or target different apps to different device types, whatever? Can we do that? The answer is yes, you can, right? Again, because you're going to have groups that you will tie to the Autopilot Device Prep profile here in a moment. So you could conceivably have 100 different groups to support, multiple 50 or so different Autopilot Device Prep profiles, right? You could do that if you wanted to, right? Okay, so that's creating the two groups, the device group and the user group. Now, we need to go and create one more thing before we're ready to do the Autopilot Device Prep profile, and that is over here in Apps. Let's go back here. So I'll go to Apps, and one of the things that I need to do is, I've already mentioned, there's this enrollment time grouping where the idea is that you will identify and target up to 10 apps and up to 10 PowerShell scripts to a device and those will be immediately deployed when the device is completing Autopilot Device Prep. In order to do that, you will need to go to the individual apps and scripts and target them to the Autopilot device group that you just created. Not the user group, the device group, because that's where your Autopilot Device Prep device will get added, right? So I'm going to go through and just look at my apps that are targeted to Windows, and I've picked a couple, and I've already targeted them, but I'll just show you one. So here's Rich Copy, right? So I've already adjusted the targeting of this app so that it's going to go to my Autopilot Device Prep group. So here's my assignment. You see, here's my Autopilot Device Prep group that I just showed you. Now, question might come up. You said you can do apps and PowerShell scripts. Yes, you can. What app types do we support? The answer is line of business apps. Win32 apps is a big one. And there will be, App Store apps as long as they are the new App Store. They use WinGet and so forth. Then we support those for sure. And also Microsoft 365 apps. We will support deploying those, right? So if you pick whatever you want in that list, right, of supported apps, up to 10 apps and up to 10 PowerShell scripts that you want to deploy as a part of Autopilot Device Prep. Now, here I'm showing you that you need to adjust the targeting of those apps and scripts. I'm not going to belabor it more than that. It's pretty easy, right? This is not the only place that you're going to have to make that connection, right? You'll have to also do it as a part of the Autopilot Device Prep configuration that I'll show you next, right? But this is what you will do first. All of this work is to get ready to build the Autopilot Device Prep configuration. So let me go and show you how we can do that, right? So to do that, we're going to go navigate over to Devices, and then we're going to navigate to Windows, and then Enrollment. right? Here we go. And so enrollment gives us a nice breakdown of enrollment options. Here's our Autopilot device prep. You see it's kind of standing alone from traditional Autopilot, right? Because it is a separate thing, as mentioned. So I'm going to go look at my Autopilot device prep policies. You're going to see that I have one created already that I will walk you through in a minute. But let's go create a new one as if we didn't have one, right? And we have different sections here that we need to address. So we'll hit next, or you can just click on basics, give a name, whatever. Now, here's where we're going to define the device group. So this is that group of devices where you put in the security principal with that GUID, right? And so I mentioned you can have whatever name you want. Doesn't really matter what the name is. You can have multiple groups, right? If you want to create a different Autopilot device prep profile with different settings for different groups of devices that will go through Autopilot, absolutely can. The only thing that matters is that you have your group constructed properly with the service principal, and then if you have 20 of those groups, that's fine. You can pick whichever one you want and put it in here, right? So I'm going to go find mine. Autopilot devices group right here, device preparation, right? So that's mine. So I'll click next. Then my configuration settings. So these are your Autopilot configuration. And so these are all drop downs, which kind of gives you the idea. Maybe we will do some additional development in the area. Right now, it's just user driven. It's just single user. It's just intra ID joined. Here's where you decide standard user admin, right? And then here are your UBI settings. Very much compacted list compared to traditional Autopilot, but still, what you need and whatever you want to do, right? Here's where you list your apps, up to 10 of them. So you do have to list your apps in this list, in addition to targeting the apps at the appropriate device group, so that that Autopilot Device Prep knows what to expect, what apps need to be there, right? Same thing for scripts, right? All right, so then scope tags is optional. Assignments, this is where you're going to define what configuration the user is going to go through. So this is your users group, right? Again, doesn't matter. You can have 10 different user groups. Just choose the right one for this profile, right? Name it whatever you want. So I'll just have this Autopilot there, user group, right? So this is my one user group that has me in it. And I'm not going to save this because I've already got one. And here is mine, right? So I've got my device group here that I just showed you. Here are the 10 settings. Here's my user group that's assigned, right? So I have also these apps that are assigned down here that I've configured, right? So again, whatever you want to do. But this is the Autopilot device prep profile. And let's go see it actually work. So I'm going to pull up a virtual machine here that is staged and ready to roll. So through the magic of virtual machine checkpointing, I'm going to move forward. This is Windows 11 because only Windows 11 is supported. And keep going. And you notice, by the way, that, You notice, by the way, that it did not ever ask me for a network connection. Why? Because I've already got a network connection provided. In my case, it's an Ethernet connection. If you didn't have a network connection, it would take you through and ask you to supply one so that we could go get connected and do whatever, right? So just working through the process now, and I don't know why this Windows 11, when I initially set it up, It didn't have to go through a restart here, but it does now. Don't know why, whatever. You'll still see what I want to show you. Probably because of the way I've checkpointed things, not sure. But here we go, and it's going to come back up, right? And continue on. And here's going to be the key. Now, remember, in traditional Autopilot, you have to collect the hardware ID. Now you don't. Why do you not? Because the way that we work with this is by the user sign-in. That's why you have to tie the Autopilot Device Prep to a group of users so we know who this is targeted to and who's allowed, right? So this right here is key. If I specified anything other than this account, then Autopilot Device Prep wouldn't work. Intune standalone on Microsoft. Okay, good. So I'm going to sign in here. I'm going to have to do multi-factor authentication. Just a moment while I do that in a second. It's checking. Okay, so I need to sign in another way for me. Stand by while I do that. Waiting for a text to show up. Here we go. All right. And then off we go. So the fact that I did this, and this user was targeted in that group that I assigned the Autopilot Device Prep profile to, I'm going through Autopilot, right? And you're going to see pop up in just a second the windows start to enroll the device, whatever. Here it comes, right? 1%. So I'm implementing installing the management extension. So you know from this screen that we're going through Autopilot Device Prep. Otherwise, we would not be doing anything like installing management extension, which is part of the Intune management, et cetera, right? So this will take a while. We're not going to watch the entire time as this runs, but Autopilot Device Prep is definitely running, right? So, okay, let's take this away all the way back to these PowerPoint slides, right? So we did configuring, we did in action, right? There are a couple of things that I want to show you still. So let me go over here, stand by. So if we navigate over here, so it talks about reporting. So let me show you at least a glance at the reporting side. So if we go to devices and we go to report or monitor, come on, mouse, monitor. Then we scroll down to enrollment. We have the Autopilot device preparation deployments, and you can see the one machine that I've done here. And if I click on it, you see it's successful, right? If not, then you should be able to see some detail about the device and so on, right? So you see the details about the device, the apps targeted to the device, the scripts targeted to the device, and so on. You also see the name of the device. So that's one thing while this is loading. That is not a part really of Autopilot Device Prep. So in traditional Autopilot, why is this taking so long? Here, let me close this and try it again. In traditional Autopilot, we do have the ability to rename the device. There's like a rename template, whatever. That's not so much a thing with Autopilot Device Prep. There's no device renaming. It's just the stock name. However, you can rename the device through configuration profiles. So there is the ability to do that in configuration profiles. Ironically, that is not supported, or I haven't checked in a while, but at least it wasn't supported for hybrid joined devices, but it is supported for intra-ID joined devices. So since Autopilot Device Prep just supports intra-ID joined devices, you could conceivably use that. I do not know why this is taking so long. Let me try this one other thing. Just pull up another portal and see if something happened to mine that made it go slower. So let's go try it this way. Okay, and so enrollment here, right here. Let's go look. Strange. I just literally had this up looking at it, and it was populating. So anyway, this is where you have the additional detail. I'll let this cook in the background and see what happens, right? But in the meantime, I'm going to minimize that, and we'll go back and continue on. So in terms of tips and tricks, right, there are some things not currently supported. I mentioned the rename is not supported. I don't know if we will do a rename thing in Autopilot Device Prep because, as I mentioned, you can do that for an intra-ID join device through a configuration profile. Don't know, right? There's some other things not supported like self-deploying mode and pre-provisioning. Don't know what's going to happen with those, if we will include those at some point. It's up to the product team. So the other things, let's see, the ability to associate a device with a tenant, that's not supported. Oh, one thing that I really should show you real quick, let me go back and show you this. Let's see if this has progressed. Still waiting. Let me go over here and I'll show you this, right? So one other thing, you've seen Autopilot Device Prep work. And the way it works is because the user that's logging in, that account is recognized as being approved for Autopilot Device Prep. But here's the thing. If you were to go reset a device and log into a device at an electronic store somehow, right, and log in with this set of credentials, then that device could be Autopilot Device Prep too, right? And you don't want that. There's an additional optional layer of protection that will make sure Autopilot Device Prep only applies to devices procured for your corporation, and that is to go use, I'm going to skip out of this, go use, come on, Windows, enrollment, right? I think it's enrollment. Is it enrollment? Shoot, I'll find it. Corporate device identifiers. That's what you want to use. It is absolutely not a requirement, but it is a very useful thing to have to make sure that the devices that you want to manage, where the heck is corporate device identifier these days? Stand by. I will find it. Okay, so my bad, I found it. So it is under enrollment, but it is not under enrollment as I was focused, right? So if I go under devices, and then I was focused on Windows, but instead, if I look at this main tab and click enrollment here, then corporate device identifiers will show up. And so I can either upload a CSV spreadsheet that contains all of my corporate device identifiers for, in this case it's Windows, but corporate device identifiers also applies to Android and iOS. So I can do it that way, load up in bulk, or I can manually type in the details for my corporate device identifier here. And the bottom line is, if the device is not on this list, then it won't be honored for Autopilot Device Preparation. And so that's probably a step, although it's optional, probably a step you want to take to make sure that the devices that you are allowing to go through Autopilot Device Preparation are just the ones for your organization, right? Okay, so for those Intune folks who have config manager background, you may have worked with operating system deployment, and there is no direct equivalent to operating system deployment, specifically task sequencing, in Autopilot Device Prep. However, there are items in Autopilot Device Prep that will function similarly to what you're experienced with, what you are accustomed to with OSD. So, as an example, and hopefully the list will get even broader as we go along of capabilities. But for example, if you want to install your quality update patches if you want to make sure that your Windows systems are on the latest version of quality updates, then you can do that during out-of-box experience of Windows 11. You would have seen, if we would have let the system progress, that after it finished autopiloting, it would go and install the latest quality updates just automatically during UBI. Right now, that's something, there's some discussion right now as I'm recording this video about controls that we want to give enterprise admins to determine how that responds and whether or not you allow it. But that is a possibility. Installation of drivers, right? You can do that during UBI. Pre-targeting of policies, right? That's enrollment time grouping. So it doesn't cover all policies, right? You can't do just any configuration policy you want during enrollment time grouping, but we talked about that you can have up to 10 apps, 10 PowerShell scripts. Maybe we'll expand that capability as we go along. Don't know. We'll see, right? But with the initial ability to deploy these apps and scripts, the key ones that you need to get the system up and operational, the thought is that after the system becomes alive and just does normal check-in, then we can roll down other settings that are important to the system along the way. Right? There's the ability to do required apps. Again, that's through enrollment time grouping and some app-specific configs you can do. You can get that done with pre and post installation scripts on Win32 apps and different things, right? So there's a lot of things that are in Intune already that will deliver a task sequencing like experience. It's not task sequencing, but it is the ability to deliver some similar kinds of things, right? I even think about the situations where maybe an application requires that something be loaded first, right, before the application's there. So you can achieve that with dependencies in Win32 apps, right? And that's another little thing to mention. I probably shouldn't, but I did say that you are limited to 10 apps, 10 scripts, right? Well, not exactly. Because if you have dependencies in your Win32 apps, well, now you can expand the list of apps that roll down beyond just the 10. Now, I would definitely not recommend, trying to roll down 50, right, during that. But you get the idea, right? The other and other things may be coming as we go along. We'll see. Like I mentioned, this is still under development, but wanted to go ahead and show this to you now because I think it's a significant step in the evolution of Autopilot, and I wanted to share it. So that said, we will wrap this session up here, and we will see you next time.